What's up, everyone? Before we get into today's episode, I've got an announcement. Listener Request Month is coming back to the main quest. With April being the show's anniversary, I can't think of a better way to celebrate than handing the keys over to you and letting you decide what I play and cover on the show. This is your chance to make me play anything. Want me to talk about Mega Man X way before it's scheduled to come up on the show? You can do that. You want to completely ruin my week by forcing me to play Perfect Weapon? I wouldn't recommend it, but you can do it. But before you start getting trigger happy, there are a few rules. First, you can't submit a game that I've already covered. I know I've done a lot, so do a quick double check on the feed. You don't want your submission tossed if it gets picked. Second, submit 2 games. This is a safety net in case I've already covered one, or if I don't own it. Again, submitting 2 games means your ballot still has a shot. Third, please don't go crazy with 80-hour JRPGs or massive time sinks. I love long games, but shorter games mean more episodes and more variety. Try to keep picks under 20 hours. If you're unsure, howlongtobeat.com is your friend. And finally, if you are a patron, first of all, thank you. You get up to 2 extra submissions. That means you can triple up on a title you really want, or throw 3 completely different games into the pool. So where do you send your picks? You can submit through mainquestpod.com, join the Discord, and head into the PvP channel. Those links are all at linktr.ee/mainquestpod, or just check out the show notes. The deadline to get your submission in is Friday, February 6th. That is Friday, February 6th. Don't wait, because it's going to sneak up on you. Once again, mainquestpod.com or linktr.ee/mainquestpod. Have fun, good luck, and now let's get into the show. Welcome back to another episode of the Main Quest podcast. This is, of course, the #1 retro gaming podcast that isn't afraid of attacking men in wheelchairs. This is episode 116. I haven't recorded a mainline episode in a while. I think this is 116. I do know who I am, though, and I am your host, Keith. And in case you don't know what this show is, it is indeed a retro gaming podcast, and I am replaying all of the games that I grew up with and checking in on just how good they still are. Sorry, I am giggling at this cat who is attacking the monitor as I record. If this is your first episode, I have many episodes in the backlog, ranging from Game Boy games, Sega CD, Genesis, TurboGrafx, NES, even some modern titles sprinkled in there. And if that's not enough, there is an entire separate feed over on the Patreon. There's a lot of bonus episodes you won't hear on this feed, as well as some extra perks when it comes to Listener Request Month and the chance to vote on what games I'll be playing next. Right now, the patrons are voting on future episodes, and those episodes could be Ukulele and the Impossible Lair, Spark the Electric Jester, Perfect Dark, and Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. And at the time that this episode drops, I think that poll might be over. You still might have a day or two to jump in. I'm not sure. But if you're interested, you have to check it out. You got to do it now. Patreon.com/The Main Quest. Link is also in the show notes. You'll also find the link tree in the show notes. There's links to merch and all the other places you can find the show on social media, if that's your thing. Probably not the best use of your time to follow the show on X or Blue Sky or whatever else I have an account on, because I'm pretty much stepping away from all of those platforms. I have zero desire to interact with any of that stuff. But finally, you are cordially invited to the Discord community. Link to that is also in the show notes. And if you really want to get a hold of me and chat with like-minded people and other creators, or you just want to keep tabs on what's going on with the show the correct way, come hang out in the Discord. I do stream from time to time. I got to do it more often. We actually had a movie night a few weeks ago. It's a good time. And I think that's it for housekeeping. It is a solo episode today. I am usually, but not always, joined by a guest. And on the episode doc, I saw that nobody signed up for this episode. And so I figured that I would kind of ease into the new year here with, I guess, a classic main quest discussion. I actually don't think anybody signed up for any of the Final Fight games, now that I think about it. Which is concerning, because it has been a long time since I played any of them. So I don't know if that says a lot about the quality of those games, or if people don't enjoy beat-em-ups that don't have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in them. Anyway, it is a new year. I hope you enjoyed yours and the holidays prior to that. And if you didn't, then you are in the same camp that I am. I had a lot of time off the last 2 weeks, and I'm going to tell you right now, I didn't do a goddamn thing. Just relaxed, decompressed. Mostly played a lot more of Binding of Isaac, which, speaking of, I think I'm done with that game for now. I feel like I hit a wall where I'm just kind of not unlocking anything else, and I don't know how to unlock anything else. And if you want some context for how far along I am in that game, I'm pretty sure that I have only completed 25% of what that game has to offer. So I'm missing a lot of stuff. Other than Isaac, I started to play this game called He Is Coming. It is a roguelite RPG game that has you roaming around a massive map, finding items and weapons, fighting monsters for loot, and passing by towns to find upgrades. And the mechanic that anchors everything is this day-night cycle, which basically acts as a timer until a boss eventually shows up. During this cycle, you unlock more of the map, battle, and build your character to prepare for the boss that's ahead. Fortunately, the game does tell you what boss is coming up, so you can prepare ahead of time, but building for a specific boss means that you have to spend the time rebuilding for the next, and ultimately, you could be wasting a lot of time and a lot of potential. I haven't played a ton of this game so far, maybe about 4 hours. I have died a lot, and I've only defeated 2 bosses, and I don't know, I feel like that's pretty decent considering how I can't figure out how the hell to heal in battles. Now, it's an RPG, it is turn-based, but it's also an auto-battler, so all the decisions that you make, all the decisions that you would make during a battle in any other RPG, you're actually making outside of battle, so that once you are confronted with an enemy, the AI carries out all of the actions that you've prepared beforehand. It's really interesting, but I'm not going to get far if I can't figure out how to get my character to heal themselves during battle. There are passive abilities that you can get that slowly heal you every turn, which helps, but it's not like a run saver. The thing that I'm really confused about is just how you go about using items like potions and meat, things that heal a chunk of HP at any given moment. And during the tutorial of the game, it sort of tells you how to use it. It says that the item placement in your inventory matters, and that items in the first slot or in the earliest slots will be used automatically during battle. And no matter where I place those healing items, my character does nothing with them. So I don't know if I misunderstood something or if the game is broken. I don't know. I do plan on coming back to the game at some point. I am having a lot of fun with it, so I'll figure it out eventually. And then after like 10 years, I have dived back into Kerbal Space Program. There's just something really relaxing about that game. Outside of the fact that it took me like 3 hours to finally build a competent ship to orbit around the planet and do some science stuff. I did manage to have a successful mission and return home. But yeah, I do kind of plan on dipping into that game on and off throughout the next year or so. I do want to try and go to the moon again, which I have never had a successful mission to. Back when the game first launched, no pun intended, I did manage to land on the moon, but I never returned. There were so many dead, or even worse in some cases, stranded Kerbals on the moon and kind of floating around the void of space. But this time, this most recent playthrough, they all just mostly passed on the launch pad. Pour one out for my homies. And so yeah, that's kind of what I've been up to the past couple of weeks. I've got some stuff going on in my personal life that might interfere with the output of this very program. I don't know much as of this recording, but I will keep you guys in the loop. Don't worry about it. And before anybody starts messaging me, it's nothing bad, you know. Basically, I'm just going to be going back to school. So that means any free time that I have in which I would be doing this will be going to getting that bachelor's so I can double up on bachelor status. Hey, ladies, which is the complete opposite from when I stopped doing the podcast a few years back. I might be stopping the podcast for completely different reasons. I shouldn't say I'm going to stop doing the podcast. I'm not going to stop doing it. It's just going to be reined in much more than it has ever been. But anyway, enough about that. We don't know schedules or anything yet. So let's just ride this wave. Let's talk about Final Fight. As for my previous history, prior to playing it for this show, Final Fight was one of those games that I rented a lot. I played this game a lot when I was a kid, but I don't recall playing the arcade cabinet. And having been to Galloping Ghost recently, twice actually, I don't even remember seeing a cabinet over there. And if they did have one, there's probably a good chance that it didn't work. A lot of their stuff has been busted lately, like as if somebody may have punched the arcade cabinets to death, trying to find a pizza or meat. Anyway, that's a beat 'em up reference. I could have sworn I played this game with my friend back in the day, but it could have very well have been the second or third game that I'm thinking about, because in this one, you cannot play co-op, which when I was doing the research on this game isn't as common as I initially thought it was when it came to home console ports. So I'm willing to bet that this is one of those games we passed the controller back and forth, just trying to get as far as we could. And that was that. Other than that, I really don't have incredibly strong memories of the game, because unless it was a licensed game, I'm sorry, these types of tough guy brawlers all kind of blended together for me. Like as a kid, I would not have been able to tell you the difference between this, Streets of Rage, Captain Commando, Double Dragon. I couldn't do it. And as an adult, I'm also kind of like, oh, they're kind of the same thing. I mean, I can tell the difference now, but also there's not much of a difference. They're kind of the same. But back then also, I didn't know that there was like a loose Street Fighter connection, which we'll talk about more in a few minutes. I think I've told this story before on the podcast, probably on one of the Mortal Kombat episodes. I hated Street Fighter. I didn't care for it until I was much older, so a lot of this stuff really went over my head, and to be honest, I still don't find it very interesting. And I don't know how far the rabbit hole actually goes, but we should talk about it for a second, right? Because maybe you do enjoy the connection. Final Fight is a beat-em-up or a brawler. I use both terms with reckless abandon. I might throw belt scroller in there too. Get used to it. It was developed and published by our daddy Capcom. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it was originally released as an arcade game made on this CPS-1 board, which had an insanely long shelf life. Ghouls and Ghosts was also a CPS-1 game, and Capcom was just pumping games out on this thing all the way up and through the year 2000. That's like 12 years worth of games on this one arcade board. Of course, there were variations of the board for those higher end games that they were making, but they still got a ton of use out of this one. And Final Fight initially began life as a follow-up to the first Street Fighter and was tentatively called Street Fighter 89. And so now you might be thinking, well, hey, that's kind of weird. One is a traditional fighting game, and this one is a belt scroller. But you have to also remember that that was the style at the time. Zelda and Zelda 2, not the same. Castlevania and Castlevania 2, not the same. Mario and Mario 2, not the same, unless you're in Japan. Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy 2, also not the same. The list goes on, and it still happens today, but developers, I think, mostly play it safe. Why is this dude breathing so hard? The cat is breathing very hard. But the idea was, he's okay. But the idea was to carry on the story and keep combat to the streets, but just not locked into a 1v1 match. And this is still early Capcom that we're talking about. And a lot of people who worked on Final Fight were designers doing multiple jobs at the same time. So we've got Yoshiki Okamoto, who produced the game. Akira Nishitani and Akira Yoseda designed the gameplay. And then we've got the legendary duo of Maname Matsume and Harume Fujita, who composed the soundtrack. And if you aren't familiar with those last two names, you gotta go listen to more Main Quest. Go back and listen to some Mega Man 3 or Ghouls and Ghosts, or Ghouls and Ghosts, Ghosts and Goblins, or what's the other one? The spin-off, Gargoyle's Quest. It's got electrolytes. Personally, I think the biggest push for the genre change from going from Street Fighter to this was just how dominant beat-em-ups were in the arcades at the time. Fighting games were around, but didn't really explode until a few years later when Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat came out. But when playtesting was done on Final Fight or Street Fighter 89, the public had the same reaction most people had about the games I just mentioned a few minutes ago, like Zelda 2 and Castlevania 2, and said, hey, this ain't Street Fighter. So Capcom pivoted away from the Street Fighter branding and renamed it to Final Fight while doing nothing to change its identity otherwise. However, with hindsight, it is a little funny how public perception of Final Fight was in comparing it to the first Street Fighter. Now, I've never played the first Street Fighter. I really don't think I need to, but without giving too much away, I am willing to bet that Final Fight holds up much better than the first Street Fighter. And I think a lot of the design philosophy that went into this game is parallel to what Street Fighter 2 did become. There's a simplicity to the controls in which anyone can pick up and play, but the depth comes from knowing how to perform special moves, to do crowd control. There's positioning and recognizing patterns. Nishitani prioritized game feel over game logic, which is one of the many reasons I think Street Fighter 2 felt so good to play back then. And then you have the limitations of the day, which helped contribute to all of the personality that this game has. Walking animations, bonus stages, and even spoken dialogue are all memorable parts of Final Fight that wouldn't even be there if the team couldn't figure out how to jerry-rig the hardware. And even with all of the masterful programming, a lot of the stuff in this game took up so much ROM space that it did eventually come to bite them in the ass when it came to the home console version. As for the arcade game, Final Fight was released in 1989. It was incredibly successful in Japan and in the US, and was mostly praised for its massive sprites and the satisfying combat. This, of course, then led to the home console port for the Super Nintendo, which released on December 21st, 1990 in Japan, November 10th of 91 in the US, and December 1992 for the PAL regions. And so the game, of course, that we are talking about is the Super Nintendo version, and it was a remarkable conversion at the time because of the fidelity and how smooth it played. But as I alluded to just a moment ago, there are a lot of cuts that people were not happy with. So first things first, no couch co-op, no 2 players. I mentioned that earlier, and there's not much of an excuse for that. I mean, that is big. You gotta have that. So many of its contemporaries had couch co-op. They could have made it work. I think Capcom could have done it. Now I'm playing devil's advocate here, though. And after having read interviews with Nishitani at the time, the game probably would have ran like hot garbage. So I'm sure they were at a crossroads when it came to whether or not they wanted to implement 2 players or not. Next thing was that one of the stages is notably missing because this was the first brawler that I've played in a very long time that didn't have an elevator stage, which is literally like the signature sign of whether or not you're actually playing a real beat 'em up. And then, because of Nintendo standards, some of the dialogue and enemy sprites have been censored, which I think of the 4 changes here, is probably like the least heinous. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the presentation. I don't think it matters that much, and it doesn't really change the game, really. But the last cut that they made was they decided to cut an entire playable character. The third character, Guy, just Guy, not present. There's no Guy. Chris Collinsworth loves Guy.
Here's a guy. This is a big, thick-bodied guy. He has just huge thighs and just a powerful-looking guy.
We all love Guy. Actually, here's my hot take. I don't care. I don't care that Guy's not in this game. But people did care. And it was enough for Capcom to follow up the game with a special, this is literally what it's called, a special Guy edition called Final Fight Guy, which still didn't have every playable character because then they just removed Cody instead. And they also were missing an entire stage. They didn't put the stage back in. And despite the limitations of the hardware, giving this conversion of the game its feel and personality, it is also like one of the biggest letdowns that they weren't able to faithfully convert the entire game for console. And even though the Street Fighter title was dropped from the game, it is still within the Street Fighter universe, as many of the characters have gone on to appear in the franchise at one point or another. And since its release, Final Fight has been ported to the Amiga, Amstrad CPC, Atari ST, Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum, Sega CD, CPS Changer, X68000, and the Game Boy Advance. I'm totally pretending like I know what the CPS Changer and X68000 is. Review scores at the time for the SNES game, of course. Famitsu gave it a 25 out of 40. Computer and Video Games gave it 92%. And GamePro gave it a perfect 5 out of 5. And GamePro was not the only people to give it a perfect score. we of course have the Ass Man on GameFAQs, who gave the game a perfect score of 10 out of 10 and wrote a very lengthy review, but capped it off with, quote, "You will be lost in a world of betrayal, fallen enemies, and infatuated love that you will not plan on departing from anytime soon." End quote. Thank you to Ass Man. Spoken like a real man that appreciates ass. I guess they could be a woman despite... Anyway, speaking of people with good taste, it is time to hear what you think about Final Fight. This is Retro Recollections, which is the portion of the show where I ask everyone in the Discord, what do you think about the game that I'm covering? You heard that right, the Discord. If you want to participate in future episodes, or again, you just want to come hang out, you gotta join the Discord. And it's been a very long time that I nearly forgot about this segment of the show. I almost forgot about my own podcast, but I made it just in time to get this out. And I only have a couple here because of that. So if you missed out or submitted something after I have recorded this, I'm sorry I didn't get to it. I'll be better next time. First, we're going to start with Thrak from, of course, Thrak Ops and the 3DO experience, who says, an inferior port of a classic game. Thank you, Thrak. I think the Ass Man disagrees. But also, yes, I agree. I agree with you. Giving my thoughts away too soon, of course. Next, we have Soups, who says, I wish I was an ex-pro wrestling mayor. I want to drop street punks on their head. Soups, you don't have to become mayor to drop street punks on their heads. You can just go do that. There's nothing stopping you. As for running for office, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it's like in Canada. I won't even pretend to know. Next, we have Lethco from the Afterglow podcast, who says, I had a lot of fun on the SNES version before I even knew of the arcade version. Emulated the arcade in the early 2000s on MAME and enjoyed it as well with the extra character, level, and more baddies on screen. Then years later, I finally played what I think was the perfected version, the Sega CD. That soundtrack blew even the arcade version out of the water. Plus, you got all the stuff left off the SNES. That I did not know. I knew there was a Sega CD version because I checked it out for the development history, but did not know that it was pretty much everything that was in the arcades. I kind of would like to play that version, and I wish I had played it coming into this, but there's always still time. Just can't talk about it, right? Next, we have Matt Storm, aka Stormageddon, from the Fun and Games and Reignite podcast. They say, a solid beat-em-up that I look back on fondly. A piece of the bedrock that is the foundation of the genre. It pales in comparison to favorites like Turtles in Time or Streets of Rage 2, but it's still a perfectly fine entry in the genre. And as always, with Matt, I agree and disagree. I am a noted Streets of Rage 2 hater. Thank God I'll never have to talk about that game. Speaking of Streets of Rage 2, we're going to finish off Retro Recollections with Chris Copleen of the Retro Hangover podcast, who says, a massive disappointment. I'm with Matt in that it wasn't what Streets of Rage 1 or 2 and TIT did, but the latter two are 3 years removed from the original arcade release. The arcade release really showed off essentially the final form of the beat-em-up that would hold popularity over a decade though, especially compared to what beloved games Golden Axe and Double Dragon 2 were doing. But the SNES port? How do you it up this bad? You take a game and genre known for co-op and remove it, plus remove a whole-ass playable character. It's not like they couldn't have done it either. Altered Beast and Golden Axe could handle it on the Genesis 2 years earlier. NES and Master System games are doing it for entries in the genre. F***ing embarrassing. If you want to play Final Fight on a console, do yourself a favor and play the Sega CD version, which also includes the best OST of any version as well. Thank you, Chris, and I think as I just talked about in the development history, Capcom made some decisions in which they, yes, it's a decision that they did not have couch co-op, but they just crammed too much stuff into that cartridge. So could they have done it? Yes, they could have, but the trade-off probably would have been horrible. You know what would have been the other option? Just not to make a port at all. But then I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you about this game. So let's talk about it. Hey folks, before we get back to the episode, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about how you can support the main quest. The show's Patreon is the best way to keep this thing going. And when you subscribe, you'll get access to bonus episodes, early access to regular content, and exclusive side shows that you can't get anywhere else. What was that? Anyway, Patreon support helps me cover hosting costs, equipment, and gives me more time to do deeper dives into the games that you love.
Zero mercy.
Okay. Yeah, so you'll even receive bonus written reviews about games that I'm playing outside of the program, and
This message is brought to you by Hell Piss Zero Mercy, the only energy drink that inflicts poison, berserk, and permanent haste.
right. You know, I didn't sign off on that. That's not real. Just ignore those.
Now available in Red Ring Riptide. Only at participating cursed Patreon feeds.
I don't even know what that means. There is no energy drink. Listen, I promise, the Patreon, it's just normal podcast content. Nothing will poison you. Or whatever. Maybe.
Hell Piss. Unleash the chaos. Or forever live at 15 FPS.
Just check the show notes for the Patreon link. And thank you. And I guess drink responsibly. But not that. Don't drink that. I'm thankful that there was a good amount of development history because I'm thinking that the rest of this episode from here on out is going to be pretty straightforward, kind of like the progression of a beat 'em up. So let's start the breakdown with talking about the story for Final Fight, which is something I normally go to the manual for games like these. Games like these? Games that have a story that actually have no bearing on what's actually going on and are only about half a page in length. But we get one better. We get the entire exposition dump before we even see the title screen. And honestly, I'm gonna have to call in a favor here because this thing reads like Donald Trump on a campaign. Like this is how he talks like this. This is how he talks. Donald Trump, probably a massive Final Fight fan, I think. Do with that what you may.
Metro City, a well-known crime capital, has been ruled by violence and death for many years, a fact which the newly elected mayor and former street fighter, a tremendous fighter, Mike Hager plans to change. At the center of the problem is the huge gang known as Mad Gear. Terrible people. Mad Gear controls all of the major criminal activity in the city. When they learned of Hagar's plans, they took immediate action to bring this new mayor under their control, which is sad, very sad, and frankly pathetic.
And so we cut to a conversation between Mike Hagar and I don't know who this other person is on the phone. But okay, so here we go. Hello, Mike Hagar here.
He, Mr. Hagar. So pleased to make your acquaintance. I believe you know who I am. Don't hang up. We have a little business proposition for you. Your daughter for your cooperation. And we'll throw in the regular monthly bonus to your salary we offered before.
What? What's happened to Jessica? Who is this?
Not so fast, Mike. Turn on your TV.
And then we cut to a CCTV filming of kidnapped Jessica, I guess. You fiend! What have you done to her? I don't know why my Mike Hagar voice is that.
Nothing yet, but we will if you don't cooperate. Listen to reason. Why make your job difficult? Just let us do as we please like the mayor did before you.
And then we pan out of nowhere. We just pan to a random image of Cody throwing a towel over his shoulder, and he says, "What? Jessica was kidnapped. The Mad Gears must pay." And then we get the title screen, which is admittedly very, very cool. But man, it's been a while. I can't even remember the last time I said something like this, but we are essentially rescuing a princess. That's the trope, at least. So here's the thing. So what's written in the manual is far better than what we get in the game. But either way, if you don't have context for who Cody is, they don't say anything in game or the manual as to why he's even here. So if you played this game without listening to this episode, which you're not, you would probably be like, who is this random generic white guy? Where did he come from? Like, Capcom just slides him into the last frame of the story before the title screen, and it's weird. It's funny. The story is dumb, and in the game, Mike Hagar doesn't know what Mad Gear is, but in the manual, he does know who Mad Gear is, and it says that he took office to put an end to the gang. Which is like, so Hagar already has the motivation to stop them. So I don't know why Mike is at the center of the story, because the actual inciting incident, the thing that kicks the game off, right, is Jessica getting kidnapped. And Jessica is Cody's girlfriend. So narratively, it makes way more sense for Cody to be the main character with Hagar being his backup. Because Hagar already has a reason to go after Mad Gear. It's literally his job as mayor. He doesn't need the extra motivation. Cody does. Again, we're thinking way too hard about a story that only exists to fucking justify punching wrestlers and prostitutes. But the game gives Hagar two separate reasons to be here, while Cody just kind of feels like he's just there in his own girlfriend's rescue story. And then there's Guy, which I didn't play or look up the arcade version, so I don't know where he would fit into all of this. It just doesn't matter. Dude's name is Guy. Like, he's the vanilla ice cream to Cody's white bread. So let's do this. Let's talk about the gameplay. It is about as cut and dry as any other beat 'em up that I've covered on the show before. More recently on the Hyperstone Heist episode, Chris and I talked about how, for the most part, each of the turtles feel the same. Their supers are different, and the weapons they have change combat up enough, but there's not much else there that drastically changes how you play the game. And if that's what sets Final Fight apart from not only games which were released 3 years later, but it also separates it from stuff like Altered Beast or Golden Axe. So you've got the two playable characters, right? Mike Hagar is this large, beefy wrestler. He's a tank, and his attacks are much stronger than the nimble boxer that is Cody. So their archetypes match their movesets, and even though the button configuration for their moves remains the same, how those moves are used are actually what matters. And now there's not a ton of stuff here. Like I said, it's pretty simple. They both have a throw, 2 aerials, and 2 ground moves, and a special, which, in keeping with tradition, when used, hurts the character. So you still have that risk reward factor built into this. Now, what makes these different is Hagar's moves are driven by strength and crowd clearing, and Cody's by speed and technicality. Cody's flying kick is great for when you're getting flanked by both sides, and you need to get out of a situation fast by attacking enemies in the front and in the back of you. But on the other end of things, Hagar's dropkick can clear multiple enemies in front of him and drop their health significantly, but he'll be open up to attacks from anybody flanking him from the back. So there's a very technical aspect to this game that you really didn't get with other beat-em-ups at the time, which I think is strongly corroborated by the other beat-em-ups that I have already covered on this very program, and why I think most of those games don't hold up all that well. Spoilers. Adding to this layered cake are the enemies. And again, they also have these archetypes, right? You've got the strong brutes, the technical jugglers, your standard crowd killers and sub-bosses that become regular enemies. And having played a few of this game's contemporaries for the podcast, it really feels like a lot of those games just threw random waves of enemies at you without any thought of how well they match the situation or how their mechanics complement each other. Again, talking about Hyperstone Heist, and I think that is a game that does not really think about what kind of enemy combination that it is throwing at you. And so there is this thoughtfulness to Final Fight in regards to how the enemies are spawned and the way the AI walks around the screen and knows exactly what it needs to do, when it needs to do it, according to what other enemies are doing on the screen. And I think it is very clever. It's very easy to say how cheap the enemy AI is here. And it is, especially when you have a lot of enemies that just they just come out of nowhere off screen. Like those dancing knife guys, they suck. They're the worst. But that's all stuff that you can memorize on repeated playthroughs. And when you know what's coming and you can actually pay attention to how the enemy AI is reacting and adjusting to the situation, I think that's where the game really excels. With that said, this game is very difficult. And I did not finish it. I could not beat it. Eventually, I did enter in some cheat codes just to see how difficult the final boss was. And I can't imagine beating this game without playing with somebody else, which again is the game's biggest failure. And even though this version is missing a stage, I think it's too long. And I think that's felt only because it is a single player game. It's also a product of its time. It is a game designed to take your money and disrespect that time. So I feel like because of that, some of the waves of enemies that do spawn here are way too long. They go on way too long. And I guess if you're going to remain faithful to an arcade game, I guess that's something you keep in. It's a weird trade-off, in my opinion, considering what was left here on the cutting room floor. But really, I mean, that's the gameplay. I mean, you've got your usual beat 'em up staples. You've got health drops from barrels, scoring items, weapons that give you a little extra damage, a little bit of extra reach. None of that stuff is new at this point. But what I do feel is new for the time, and what Capcom absolutely ran away with here, is just how distinct the characters feel and how intentionally the enemy design pushes you to engage with those differences. Or you could just jump kick your way through the game like pretty much any beat 'em up of this era. Because Final Fight, it's not complicated, but it is thoughtful. There's a lot of intentional game design in here. It asks you to pay attention to positioning, timing, and crowd control in a way a lot of its contemporaries they didn't. And I think that's what stands out, even now, even in a version that's missing content. The foundation is strong enough that you can still feel the ambition underneath it, which makes this version of the game sting just a little bit more than it should. And we're already at presentation. These episodes go at a neck-breaking pace when you don't have a guest. Let's tie this up with the presentation of Final Fight. How does it look? How does it sound? And I'll come right out and say that this game's music and sound effects are horrible. Which it's not a dig at composition, but the quality and lack of understanding of the Super Nintendo sound hardware is on full display here. And it's especially noticeable when you compare it to the other games that I've covered, some of which are launch or near launch titles that sound dramatically better than this. I honestly can't think of an excuse for this. The sound effects at least pull their weight. Punches, kicks, body slams, like those all are chunky sounding and satisfying. And when you pair it with the gameplay, it feels really good to stab somebody with a knife. But the music itself just really wears thin, which also might feed into my gripe that I felt like the game was too long. Combined with it being single player, all the stages, and then the music. It's a lot. And after a while, I ended up muting it, and I just threw on some era appropriate music instead. Visually speaking, I think the game looks great. The sprites maintain their big, chunky look from the arcade, which really sells the impact of every hit. Hagar's body slam looks absolutely brutal, definitely paralyzing literally everybody, which was something that was not outdone until like 2005 when Leon Kennedy took that crown in Resident Evil 4. I also love the non-distinct city setting of this. Could be New York City. It could also be San Francisco, but it's probably definitely actually New Jersey with how trashy everything looks. And I'm pretty sure I've talked about this on a previous episode at some point, but I love the mid to late 80s interpretation of what Japan thinks American cities look like, which is like New York City kind of did actually look like this until like the mid 90s, but well, I'm sure some of it still does. But all this is to say that the environments are appropriately sketchy. They're distinct from one another, even though it doesn't have that natural environmental storytelling through progression. You get to walk into a public park restroom and beat the shit out of people with a metal pipe, which is really cool. It doesn't get any grungier than that. But also you don't know exactly how you got there anyway. Does it matter? Not really. But it'd be nice to know. And finally, one of the most important parts of the presentation is the way Capcom censored the game. The Super Nintendo game is bloodless, which is kind of a bummer, but overall, having looked up what got cut or changed for Nintendo, I would say it doesn't really matter that much. Who cares? I don't know. Ask yourself, dear listener, do you really care if the female enemies were just palette swapped to men? Do you really care about that? Does that really change anything about the game? Because the answer is no. Mechanically, they're exactly the same. Listen, my theory is my guess here is that the people that are really up in arms over some of the changes in this game are probably some of the same people that have opinions on the last Dragon Age game, which they haven't played, but they've got a lot of opinions about that game, and they're going to tell you all about it. assholes. So overall, I mean, the presentation is mixed. Visually, it's doing a lot of heavy lifting and still holds up. Sonically, it's one of the weakest parts of the package. There are a lot of sacrifices made to get this game running on the SNES, and while some of them were worth it, I think the soundtrack ends up feeling neutered by new tech and poor implementation. And so we're here. We're finally here. Let's wrap this up. Let me summarize my thoughts. So does Final Fight hold up? Would I recommend checking it out today in 2026? No, I do not think so. At least not this version. And that's an important distinction because I've been talking about the SNES port of this, not the arcade original, right? Capcom was really ambitious in bringing Final Fight to home consoles, and it shows both in how technically impressive the combat is, but you can also feel it in everything that didn't survive the transition. The cut content, the missing co-op, and a presentation that doesn't necessarily age very well. And more than anything, I feel, and many others feel, that Final Fight just isn't a game built for a single player experience, and that's all you get here. And so what worked as an arcade quarter muncher with a friend eventually started to feel exhausting and strangely hollow when you're just playing it by yourself. That said, if you do want to play Final Fight the way that it was meant to be played, there are better options. The arcade version is included and available through the Capcom Beat 'em Up bundle. And of course, just like Lethko said earlier in the Retro Recollections, there's MAME. If you've got MAME, you can play the arcade version. Either way, it's pretty easy to bypass whatever compromises Capcom had to make with this port. So that will do it for the first episode of 2026. Got to get used to that. Next time on the program, I'm going to be going solo again. Probably the last time for quite a while, actually. And I will be talking about a game that was quite divisive when it was released, because it is a Mario game. But it starred his younger brother, Luigi. And no, we're not talking about GameCube games yet, which means it can only be Mario is Missing. Oh no. Oh no. Oh, what a horrible start to the year. Maybe it's not as bad as I remember. We'll see. So, until then, make sure you guys are taking care of yourselves. It's a new year. Listen, put yourself first. And always remember, it's okay to like a video game.
Life isn't just about passing on your genes. We can leave behind much more than just DNA through speech, music, literature, and movies, what we've seen, heard, felt, anger, joy, and sorrow, these are the things I will pass on. That is what I live for. We need to pass the torch and let our children read our messy and sad history by its light. We have all the magic of the digital age to do that with. The human race will probably come to an end sometime, and new species may rule over this planet. Earth may not be forever, but we still have the responsibility to leave what traces of life we can. Building the future and keeping the past alive are one and the same thing. Bigly.